Hi there. My name's Ceri Thomas from Dolby Music at Dolby Laboratories. Here today to talk about music creation in Dolby Atmos. And I've got two fine gentlemen here with me as well. So planned to do this live from Nashville. Unfortunately, at the last minute, I couldn't travel, but excited to be having this conversation with Pete Lyman, mastering engineer at Infrasonic Mastering. Pete just recently completed his Atmos room after working out of some other facilities, but forming Infrasonic Immersive with Robert Lyman and team in California also. So Pete is a Grammy-nominated and winning mastering engineer for a number of artists: Panic at the Disco, Jason Isbell, Brandy Carlisle, Stuart Simpson, and is now working in Dolby Atmos. Also with us we have Reid Shippen. Reid is the Robot Lemon part of their building there in Nashville, Tennessee, and has worked on projects across a wide range of genres. It was the 54th Annual Academy of Country Music Engineer of the Year, which was exciting, and an early adopter of Dolby Atmos workflows in Nashville. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Pete and Reid. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, I'm trying to get my screen to work here. There we go.
Be here.
What's up? So much for joining us. I wish that we could all be together, but alas, that's not to be the case. So tell us about your well. First off, you're coming together as a stereo pairing. How you guys decided to set up in the little house in Nashville and turn it into a music empire.
Yeah, I mean, he's left and I'm right? So stereo made all the sense in the world.
Yeah. Well, so I came into the picture here in Nashville about 4 years ago, but Reid's been here at the current location forever. So
I built this studio over 10 years ago, which is crazy. And it was just a place for me to work after bouncing around, and had some extra space and producers that were working out of here. And then when Pete decided that he needed to relocate from LA, it just so happened that we connected through some mutual friends, and it worked out great.
Yeah. I moved out here and I was working out of a room in Berry Hill that PMC kind of uses as a demo space over there, and I've been partnering with them for years. So as soon as this spot opened up, I jumped at it and then slowly started taking over
right.
facility.
Creeping. Yeah. And we should mention that Maurice at PMC was incredibly kind to allow Pete a place to work when he needed a place to work with us when we needed to get Atmos going in a quick, fast, and in a hurry. And they've been an amazing partner.
Yeah.
It's been a really incredible thing. So props to Maurice. Thank you, Maurice.
Yeah. That's great to hear, and obviously they've been big believers in the format for a long time, and so great to see that coming to fruition. So Reid, you're the mixer at the facility. Tell us about working with your artists in Atmos, and how that transition has gone. They adopted it nicely, or has it been bumpy?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted stuff to sound bigger than two speakers. That's always kind of been my thing. So it was incredibly freeing to work in this format when it's just now I can finally do some of the stuff that I hear in my head. The artists have been fantastic about it. In fact, one of the best compliments I think that I got on the format was I had a playback for an artist, Warner Brothers artist, and they listened to it and they were like, man, this is how my music sounds when I'm high, you know? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take that as a compliment. You know, I mean, it's people are getting used to something new, but and there's always a transition period. But everyone who's come in and actually listened and experienced, you know, experienced it, their initial reaction is always like, man, this is great. Like it feels so much more, you know, involving.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we first met a couple of years back, right? And it was well, I think last time we were together was NAMM 2020. So you know, the world has changed significantly since then in terms of, you know, well, everything. What made you finally make the decision to go for this and kind of turn Atmos on, as it were?
Well, I mean, one of the lessons I think we got from the pandemic is that you know, change and disruption is healthy, or maybe not healthy. That's probably the wrong choice of words for a pandemic, but you know, it just is. I mean, that's the thing. So you either keep moving forward or you don't. And I like new challenges, and I like being, you know, we like being as close to the tip of the spear as possible on new formats. And it was, you know, I mean, that's why I went for it. Like, other than the fact that it's really fun to work in, like it really is enjoyable to work in. Seriously, like I love working in that format. But you know, I'd rather skate to where the puck is going.
We made the decision early on to, and I have to admit, after many conversations with you and with Maurice about the format, and we, you know, we decided, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to go all in. We're going to do it right. So it's kind of the way we do everything. It's either, you know, just go for it and make it work, and it's been great. We, you know, on the mastering side, we've had a very similar experience. People seem to be really excited about it. I think at first, you know, when you explain the format, it's kind of hard to just, you really just need to sit someone down in the room and let them experience it, and then they're sold, you know. And once they can really feel how much of an impact it has, and how different it is from what they're used to hearing, that's been kind of the biggest, you know, the biggest selling point, and people are really excited about it. I'm hoping, you know, one of the hurdles I've had as a mastering engineer is just with obviously with COVID, it's harder to get people in here to experience it, but that's slowly starting to happen again. So.
Yeah, it's definitely definitely been one of our challenges as well. Is you know, explain to people it's not just about headphones, although it's, you know, great on headphones in many ways. It's, you know, everything that it can be, right? The you know, one of the things that, you know, happened, you know, again during the pandemic is people invested in their home entertainment systems. You know, watching Netflix and Apple TV Plus in Atmos, and, you know, that's great. And then the music thing came along, but it's still not the same as, you know, sitting in a room full of speakers like you guys have. So yeah, definitely, you know, looking forward to more artists and creatives getting back into that world and being able to experience it there. So one of the things that always fascinated me about your operation is that, you know, you kind of have come together as the entire creative stream, right? You've got a bunch of producers who work there, you know, Reid's, you know, in his room mixing stuff, and then you're adding the mastering, you know, capability in there. How much has that kind of driven your operation, right? I mean, is that important to have the producers and the mastering engineers right there to collaborate on these things?
I think it's a huge advantage for us. I mean, our approach to Atmos with the projects that we are collaborating on is we're doing it as a team. So we have the advantage of, it's not necessarily a traditional, like engineer producer works on a mix and then just ships it off to mastering, maybe a quick phone call and they do it. We're in each other's rooms all day long. Right. And we can make suggestions, we can talk about it. If I'm working on a record over there, I can just text Reid and he's over there in 20 seconds and we can take a listen. Also, we have the advantage because we have an internal system where I can actually just open his session and work from that if I need to. So we're kind of, our philosophy is we want to deliver a mixed and mastered Atmos product.
Right.
Now I know mastering for Atmos apparently is some sort of controversial subject, which seems strange to me because I would argue that Atmos needs mastering more than almost any other format. Well, there are a lot more variables. There are a lot more things that can go wrong, and we've seen them, and we've talked to you about some of the issues that we've had maybe on the playback side that have nothing to do with us or Dolby even. That this is just growing pains. So for all of us to be able to work together and to be in the same place is a huge advantage.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage on a creative level. When you get creatives together, you tend to make you tend to get much better creative output, right? Because everybody collaborates. And frankly, a lot of us are sick. Everybody got sick of just working in their house by themselves. Like it sucks to just be by yourself. But specifically for Atmos and the workflow, we've all been doing stereo for years, right? So we're used to that process. Atmos, Immersive is a new process, and you're learning that things that we've done so many times for stereo that we don't even think about anymore don't necessarily translate because there's a loudness spec in Atmos. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. You can have a song that's sparse that you put at 18, and you could have a song that's rocking and you put it at 18, and the sparse one is louder than the rocking one, right? Sometimes that the perception is different, and trying to make sure that all works together in a coherent way is difficult. So having the ability to have somebody come and listen and to play off stuff, or to even be like, hey, I think this is cool, why don't you throw it up and make sure that it's great, and he can say, oh, well, I brought these down a little bit, and we moved that and did that. I mean, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah. Pete, how much time have you spent kind of going back and forth with how it's how it's going to play in market, and kind of learning how your room energizes that correctly?
A lot of time. First of all, everyone wants to brag on their room or whatever, but when you guys tune my room, it's really nuts how good my room sounds. This room sounds fantastic too, but I'm a little partial.
No, he's biased.
I can't. So it is unbelievable environment to work in. You guys nailed the tuning. It's truly remarkable.
Well, I think, and the testimony was when Brian was done tuning his room, especially, he stayed after a really long day. He stuck around for a couple of hours just listening to music because he enjoyed it so much. So win.
Yeah. So
you told me about that experience, and it must be good if Brian actually gave that feedback to me.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I couldn't even be here for the tuning. I was really bummed. We spend a ton of time listening and all the different, like folding it down, listening in different configurations and formats, listening to the, doing the MP4 thing. That's one of the reasons that mastering for Atmos takes a lot longer than mastering a stereo track, because we have so many different variables and we have so many different formats to audition.
Yeah, there's a lot of deliverables, and it's also a moving target when you're pushing it to clients, right? It's a challenge, and you want to make sure that if they're listening to a binaural, or if they're listening to an Apple Spatial, or if they're listening to a physical, like those all play back correctly, right? Because this is complicated stuff. I mean, that's part of the challenge of mastering, is making sure that everything plays back correctly when the client hears it. Well, now we've got at least 3 formats to deliver on instead of 1.
Well, and we're understanding what formats or we also now know what they should not be listening to, for instance. You know, so that opens up the whole can of worms too. And what I mean by that is obviously there, you know, if you're auditioning, for instance, MP4, you know, via the iPhone and the procedure that we have to do to hear what it could potentially sound like in spatial, if you don't have all of your settings set up right, you could, in theory, easily be listening to something that will sound really wacky, but will be something no one will ever hear.
Right. Again, everybody's been listening to stereo for forever, but when we do this, we have to guide the client through stuff. And it's important that you do that because, you know, artists freak out if they're not hearing something that they're not expecting. So it's our responsibility to make sure that they actually are hearing the product.
Yeah, and it's interesting on the mastering side, it reminds me a lot of the process that I go through with a client for vinyl. Right. So vinyl, I've been cutting records for 22 years. It's a moving target. Everyone has a different turntable, and 95% of the time they're screwed up and they're not set up properly. So one of the things I really enjoy about this job is getting to talk to the clients and educating them about these things. And Atmos is really fun because it's brand new. So we're constantly learning and it's exciting. You kind of just have to always be on to be able to deal with this format. Like, we're having a great time working in it. And again, on the mastering side, it just forces even more interaction with the clients, which is always a good thing. And you know, once they're kind of educated on how to review the format, then you know, it's pretty straightforward.
And we should point out, you know, do you remember that movie, The Smartest Guys in the Room? We are not those guys, okay? We are not those guys. That guy is Jay Clark, and he works out of he's a partner of ours, and he works out of LA. Mixing Atmos in his studio, and he's forgotten more about immersive than I think I'm gonna ever know. And he's been an insanely great friend and an incredible resource for this whole process, you know. So I don't know if he's listening to this or not, but if you're listening, Jake, thank God that you exist. You're awesome.
You know, it's still early here on the West Coast, you know, for particularly for music people, like, you know.
He's watching his dog at 5 in the morning. Yeah, he's been up. He's doing some Rick Wakeman synthesizer stuff in his studio right now. Whatever he's doing.
No, I've had a lot of fun getting to know Jay as well, and you know, obviously, you know, he and Dave, you know, working alongside you guys has been fantastic. So really exciting to see all that kind of coming together under Infrasonic Immersive, which is super exciting. Look, I mean, you've been doing a bunch of work. You know, you gave me some projects that you've just completed. You know, right before this. So you know, your work with Kenny Chesney, Brothers Osborne. Are they coming into the studio and, you know, experiencing this with you, or, you know, how's that working?
It depends. I mean, generally when you're working with artists, it's very much dependent on what they're doing and what they're up to. I'm in the middle of a record right now for a band called Judah and the Lion. We're going to end up doing immersive in that, which, by the way, is going to be amazing because their stuff is super cool and textured, and there's all these like keyboards and colors and all of that stuff, which is going to be really fun. So they'll be in the studio for that. The Brothers Osborne that we just did for the Petty Tribute record, they came in and listened to that. Kenny, you know, I don't know where Kenny is right now. He's working on something else. So at some point he will be around listening to something. I just don't know when that'll be.
Yeah. Does it change how they interact with you when they kind of hear it in your space?
You know, a lot of this, and fortunately, you know, one of the advantages we have is trust, right? So when I was working on some of the Kenny stuff, because we've done a couple records together, right? So we have to go back and do all of that. I brought in the producer, Buddy, and he listened to 3 or 4 songs and he's like, this sounds amazing. Like, I love it. Now there's trust, right? Yeah. So I don't know that I'm going to see Kenny to listen to 30 songs in Atmos. I think he's going to listen to some at home and some in headphones, and we know we're all in the right ballpark. And his A&R has been in the studio
Right.
listening to every single song. She comes over here, and pretty soon we'll be able to go over there at Warner.
Nice.
But so there's been a lot of interaction, and they're learning too, right? This is a whole curve. This is a new and different experience.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, on your side, Pete, I mean, you completed projects with, you know, Brandy Carlisle and Dolly Parton, you know, the first ladies of country now.
Yeah, they weren't here for that. I mean, obviously, Brandy and I have worked on a lot of stuff together, and she's been on the road.
Right.
So during this whole time, so you know, they were auditioning things from the road. Now they were in the studio when some of it was mixed, I believe. Dolly was not here. I wish she was. Would have been awesome. But you know, we work closely with the mix engineers on both those projects,
Right.
and a pretty, you know, pretty crazy approval process on that stuff. So
yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of fun though.
Yeah.
You know, the Brandy record was really fun. I mean, I love that record, and it was challenging because it kind of, you know, that record sort of happened at the tipping point. It was released really right before Immersive was announced. So, right. You know, we had to kind of go back a step to work on the Immersive. So there was a learning curve for sure, and but I think the end product turned out fantastic.
Yeah, and it was a fascinating record. I mean, she was, you know, heavily involved, as I understand it, in the creation of all of that space that's in stereo, and you know, then putting that into Atmos is, you know, it must be really challenging to keep that intention while still, you know, while not just adding a whole bunch more reverb. How do you kind of achieve those things?
So this is the big challenge, and this is a perception problem that is going to continue to change as people experience the format and begin to think about creating in the format. Is that Immersive is not stereo plus. It's a different experience, and it should be a different experience. It is very difficult to take a stereo mix and just say, well, make it sound exactly like the stereo, just in Atmos.
Yeah.
And it's similar. It's a different scale than vinyl. It's like, here's the digital file, make the vinyl sound exactly like the digital file, but on vinyl. Well, you can't, right? Because those are apples and oranges, and this is the same thing. So it's been a bit of a journey working with people, making them realize, like, this is actually two different forms of expression of the music. It's two different experiences listening to it. It's two different forms of expression.
Yeah. Would you agree with that, Pete?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, sorry, I deal. This is a conversation I have constantly. So, especially on the vinyl side. So I'm just sort of used to it. It is apples and oranges. It needs to be treated like a completely separate format. And you know, we have had a few discussions with people. They're like, yeah, well, as long as it sounds like the stereo mix, we're cool. It's like, no, that's not how this works, and that's not going to happen. This is a completely separate format. It needs to be treated as such.
Yeah, and it's gonna take a while frankly, for everybody to get used to doing this, because we've all learned a lot of tricks to cram a bunch of things through two speakers, and you don't need to do that with Atmos. So it changes the way you approach dynamics, and it changes the way you approach the way you do stuff. And you know, it's hard to unlearn years of experience overnight.
And
so
I mean, one thing we've seen too, and I know, Ceri, we've talked about this before, but there's, you know, in the initial early stages of Atmos, and it seemed to kind of happen in this town specifically, we had people basically just doing 712 beds as Atmos, because
Right.
that was the easiest way to approach it. And while like you can make that work, we're really finding out that's not what translates the best, and that's not what sounds immersive. That's not what sounds like Atmos. I mean, you really need to take advantage of the entire toolbox instead
Right.
of just cramming it in a bed.
Yeah, it's a different paradigm.
Yeah.
It's a good challenge. The results, when done well, are awesome and so
Right.
much. But and again, and this is back to like innovation is difficult, right? Change is difficult. It's healthy. You learn, you grow,
Yeah.
and that's why we're doing this. Like full on, legit, 100% reference systems, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. So I mean, we hear a lot, in the industry in general, right, about remixing, remastering. How would you define that with Atmos? I mean, what does that look like for catalog content?
Catalog. Well, I mean, it's so when people were making records back in the day and not looking forward, sometimes you get locked into stuff, right? Now, there's a lot of, I mean, I think we all know there are records where the masters don't exist anymore. And that's,
Yeah.
There was a big fire out in LA, right? And a lot of masters went away, which is scary.
Right.
Some of the stuff, some of the back catalog stuff um, is printed in stems. Some of it is multi-tracks.
Mm-hmm.
The products that you get, the way you do Atmos is different, whether you're mixing from stems or mixing from multi-tracks. It's also a bit of a challenge. Like if somebody hands me, 200 tracks of multi-track and say, hey, I just need you to do this in Atmos. Can you, just 3 or 4 songs a day or whatever? It's like, no, this is a full mix,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
This is difficult. So there are challenges with that. There are time commitments, but I mean, I think anybody who's looking into the future realizes that you don't want to be making mono records in a stereo world. You don't want to be making stereo in an immersive, multiverse, point source, head directional. I've had a lot of conversations with A&R people about the fact that when you're gaming or when you're in what we're going to be calling a multiverse or a mixed reality or a metaverse or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
everything that you're experiencing is going to be spatial. Like everything is immersive content. And
Mm-hmm.
the last thing anybody wants to do is walk into a club or turn on a song while they're playing or hanging around, or walk up to someone and then just hear like this thing that doesn't, all of a sudden you're pulled out of the experience. I think anybody who looks at this realizes that this is all leading factors into a fully immersive mixed reality environment that we're headed towards with technology. So, and that's why it's exciting to work in, because it's important, and we're going to need that content going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think with the remix stuff too, that's why some of it is just sounds a lot better than other versions too, because I mean, a lot of it has to do with, are they working from, from partial stems? Are they working from multi-track analog tapes? Are they, was the whole record only done in 8 tracks?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to rebuild it and like maintain the intention and the presentation of the song, but just in an immersive world that was never even thought of when that music was created.
Yeah. And you also have to know that, the way Atmos works is not the way stereo works. So you have to be careful of certain things when you're working off of stems, because the way it interacts with the system and the room and the way it interacts with binaural and spatial and all of that is a lot dependent upon what's baked into some of this stuff.
Right.
So it's been a learning curve.
Mm.
It's an interesting process, but I mean, we're pros, right?
Yeah.
This is what we do.
I mean, the real exciting part about all of this is that now we have people thinking about this when they start making their record.
Right.
So when we're creating for Atmos, for immersive, that's the game changer. That's when everything starts to open up. And when Reid's tracking Dirks or Kenny Chesney or whoever, and they can think about where they want that guitar solo to be, and you know, I think arrangements of songs are going to change. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. No,
I've already started recording records where, because I know it's going to be in Atmos, I'm going to cut a guitar and a distant room mic so I can place it in the listening space without having to try and recreate it. Like, so it'll actually sound like the room. I'm placing drum mics in certain positions where I can like put you inside of the drum kit because I have those available because I know that this is something we can do. So we're right on the leading edge of that, and it's just fun to think about.
Yeah, well, you know, exciting to hear that, you know, it's coming into tracking as well, and it's one of the things that, you know, I've loved about Nashville, right? Is, you know, you guys actually still get together and record in rooms, and you know, do takes of the entire band playing and things like that, and I think it's why, you know, a lot of records work that come out of Nashville, right? You're understanding how those how those instruments actually play together. The other kind of analogy we hear is, you know, the concert hall, right? And it's one that I've used an awful lot, right? The immersive experience of listening to music. The source is mono, right? Or the source is, you know, across a stage, but the immersive nature of listening in the room is a different experience. And yeah, so kind of having those things in the back of your mind as you're going is pretty cool. So
well, and all the way back in the day, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Bach was writing certain pieces because he knew they were going to be performed in certain churches or certain atmospheres, and you know, I think as people get more and more into this, they're going to start to think creatively about how am I going to use this format to express myself in a more creative fashion, and that's really cool.
Yeah, there was early on in our time at, you know, doing Atmos music, there was a recording that was done at the Sistine Chapel, and it was one of those moments that was just like, oh, this is what immersive music can be, with, you know, the mezzo soprano exciting the room in a different way, just by, you know, walking in and hearing the space, hearing the acoustics, and you know, knowing instinctively that if she sang at that wall, it was going to resonate in a particular way. And it's like, wow, that's immersive music. So very cool. So you know, talk about, you know, great singers, and somebody you've worked with, you know, both worked with, you know, is Mickey Guyton, and you know, how was that, you know, concept? You know, did you get to speak to her before a Super Bowl performance, and or after? And
well, quick correction, we mastered the Mickey Guyton record in Atmos, and Dan Bacciagalupi, one of our mastering engineers, did that. So I did not do that. Dan did, and he crushed it.
One of the family, yeah. Yep. I didn't speak to Mickey before the Super Bowl. I spoke to Karen, who's Mickey's collaborator, producer. She was the one playing piano.
Right.
And I mean, they were just like, this is surreal. You know, this is this is crazy. And it's been great. I've on a personal note, I worked on a Mickey song years and years and years ago when she was first getting going, and it's been an uphill climb, and you know, she's been through a lot, and it's just great to see her keep going and see her get the you know, get the recognition that I feel she's like worked hard for. So that was really gratifying, and the record turned out really great, and it was super fun to go back in and reimagine it in Atmos. And that was one of the ones where it wasn't necessarily like we have to match this super hardcore to the stereo. Like we could do some fun stuff.
Yeah.
You know, trying to make it an expansion of what the music was originally. So yeah, it was great. It was a great project. She's awesome.
And, you know, cool to be trusted by the artist and producer in that, you know, as well, right? You know, kind of guiding them through the early days of what this can be.
Yeah.
So yeah, cool to see. And yeah, Dan did a great job. Pass on my congrats. All right, cool. So got some questions coming through here, some technical questions and some others. But question was, are you using Pro Tools for your Atmos work? Or are you Nuendo based, or what's your situation?
I am Pro Tools currently, sort of slowly dipping my toe into Nuendo.
Okay.
I mean, full disclosure, I'm a Steinberg user and a Wavelab user for 20 years. Wavelab is not set up for immersive. And honestly, I absolutely love Nuendo, and at some point I might make the switch, and I've been kind of going back and forth, but because of our workflow within the building, Pro Tools is just easier way to work right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic to be able to pass something off to mastering and to know that Pete has all of the control. That stuff isn't necessarily baked in, mainly because if I screw something up, he can fix it. There's also, as you know, there's a bit of a challenge when you're opening an ADM in a DAW. You're getting a bunch of mono objects and you're getting stuff that doesn't have labeling. So it adds, it's a little more challenging if you've got, an 80 object mix and it's object 1, object 2, object 3. It's a lot easier.
118.
Right. So it's a lot easier when it's like, man, the acoustics that you put on the sides, maybe they could come up a little bit and you could just go to acoustics and turn them up.
So
fair enough. Workflow to be really useful. I'm Pro Tools just because I get, you get stuff from all over and it's 99% Pro Tools. So that's
it's the other thing that we called it the binaural settings plugin, but it's actually it controls a bunch of other settings in the renderer. So the description field, you can actually make use of that right there, and when you pull that ADM into Nuendo, it will pull in the labeling from that description field. So there we go. Useful tip as well as a question.
Can we automate that, by the way? So when something's assigned to object 18, it just looks at the track name and puts it in that plugin. Can we call one of the coders and get that happening?
Never say never, but I don't think it's quite there yet. Never say never. I mean, it works in Logic, right? They just put it. Took the track name, put it straight into the objects there. So it must be doable somehow. But
I think the Stream Deck works with this with the shortcuts program. A lot of people are doing really cool stuff with that. Maybe somebody can write a script that'll do that.
There we go. We'll call it the Infrasonic Immersive workflow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Question here: where did you place your subs? The person who's asking says they use one sub just for bass management of the Atmos overhead speakers, and the other is for LFE. Do you have multiple subs, and if so, where are they?
There's some over there.
All right.
Wouldn't it be great if I did that and like the whole thing just disconnected?
No.
So subwoofers are room dependent. It depends on the size of your room. I have a really big room. The PMC A2 XBDs, they're like a full range with integrated sub kind of thing, and I have subs in the corners because I have a large room. Also, there are some theories, and I don't pretend to be an acoustician, that what you want to do with low end is you want to take it from the front wall and push it this way. I would expect that sub placement is generally room dependent, but I've had the best luck putting subs on the front wall and having it push back into the room in like a single wave.
Right. Okay, cool.
And in the mastering environment, I don't know if we have a picture of my room, but I have PMC BB5 XBDs. The bottom XBD portion, when run in Atmos, those are the subs, extra subs. Can't really, you can sort of see it. Yeah. So
sort of see them down there, but definitely challenging. Cool. All right. That's a good one. So when talking about mastering for Atmos, what plugins and outboard are you using to master your mix in, and what problems have you had?
Well, I don't know where to start on the problems. There's always problems. It's not problems. It's a learning experience. You know, challenges. So
Yeah.
just like stereo, every mix is different. You know, there could be a mix where I literally do almost nothing other than make sure we're hitting, you know, target levels, and then there's mixes where I'm digging in like crazy. So I'm a big fan of all the fab filter stuff. So
Right.
Pro Q3 is like my go-to EQ. I use a lot of that stuff. Also big plugin alliance guy. So I use a lot of that stuff.
Nugent makes some really cool tools, some really necessary tools, metering and their multi-band limiter. But again, it's, you know, one of the challenges is there's a volume spec. Everybody that works in post is totally used to that. My friends who work in broadcast are totally used to that. In stereo, a lot of times it's a competition to see how loud you can get things, which doesn't necessarily work in this format. So you know, it's a, like we said, it's an evolving challenge, and it's an evolving learning experience.
On the mastering side, that's one of the really cool things about Atmos, is allowing us to keep these mixes a lot more dynamic than their stereo components.
Right.
And we tell the client, hey, that's as loud as it can be. Everyone is in that spec. So yeah, we can, you know, we've come up with bus compression techniques, and you know, but in general, I always prefer a more dynamic moving sort of mix. And I think the space and movement is really what makes the experience immersive. So, you know, we're not trying to limit the hell out of it to make it louder than something else on a playlist. So it's a different, you know, and in general on stereo, that's not my first approach, but sometimes that's what the client wants. But in Atmos, we sort of have the spec and we get to stick with it, and we get to concentrate on just making something sound good and beautiful rather than limiting the dynamics for the sake of loudness. Obviously, sometimes you have to limit dynamics, but not just limiting it so you can push it up higher.
Well, and again, back to what we said before, this is a function of the format. When you have two speakers and you need to do what I like to refer to as 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, like you have to smush stuff to get it through the speakers, you know. Now we have, you know, now I have 914, so I don't have to crush it. I can just move it. I can place it so you can hear it and it doesn't have to compete. So it's a different paradigm, you know. It's it's fascinating and fun.
Yeah. I mean, how much does that play into kind of, you know, I guess the harmonic enjoyment of the instruments? I mean, is it nice not to be carving stuff out, or does it expose more problems with recordings and things?
It depends on the source. You know, everything's a give and take, and especially when you have two speakers, like you have to make choices. When I can move stuff outside of the stereo field, and I'm not saying like it has to be swirling around, or, you know, the main guitar has to be like behind your head. I'm just saying be able to take something that's like in two speakers and just kind of move it into this space right here and be able to do this. Yeah, I have to do less robbing Peter to pay Paul on individual instruments to make that happen, which is great.
But we still have to make it sound good in headphones.
Right.
Yeah. So the question here, I see a lot of engineers have been avoiding placing things in the center channel. How do you guys feel about that?
I don't use the center much, do I? I mean,
not a ton.
I don't know that anything's avoiding, but I have noticed for music, I don't use the LFE a ton, and if I do, it's just for one or two elements. If you really want to go down Geek Town, there's also ways that LFE can interact in the room and in the encoders, and you have to be careful what you put in there. Bass management kicks into that too. The LFE and bass management can kind of fight. So I alter what goes into the LFE, so there's a perception of low end, but it's not necessarily the same signal that's coming out of other speakers, or a different version of that. And the center channel, like I love frankly, I love using the speakers to place things that I would normally place in the center, like here. And I found that it really translates well in headphones, both in binaural and in spatial. So I don't necessarily put a lot of stuff in the center other than using divergence to fill things in, or using it as an effect or something like that. But you tell me. I mean, you've been listening to this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everyone sort of has a different style. I don't have any problem with someone deciding. I mean, I've engineers that are strictly main vocal, straight up center channel. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have noticed, like Reid said, some things in the center channel on LFE could seem to, and Ceri, correct me if I'm wrong, but seem to like make the binaural limiter react in a different way. Like something with too much low frequency content, or
right. Yeah, I mean, the fact that the low frequency is going into the binaural will have, you know, some effect on that limiter, and yeah, definitely there's things to watch out for in that. You know, in the delivery spec, there's the, you know, -3 kind of kick down on the binaural. It's worth paying attention to that, and making sure that you're not living in -6 world, and it will increase the resolution of your spatial audio. So.
We've noticed that on the mastering side too. If that limit is kicking in too hard, especially when it goes through Apple's immersive process, it seems to be even more audible. Okay. And we've had some instances where it's done kind of a really weird ducking thing that's
not on the encode side, it's on the decode side. And that, you know, I mean, this is things update, right? Like we said, it's a changing landscape. And also I'm gonna cop to being a little bit lazy, but one of the things that I like about I really love about having mastering is I want to mix for emotion, right? I want it to feel great. Like that's my primary job, is to take all of this stuff and put it together and make sure that it feels awesome. And occasionally I'm not paying attention to levels, and it's great that Pete can grab it and then be like, dude, like, no, like, be cool.
I am always paying attention to levels.
But that's a part of the collaborative process that I find really really important, because it lets us do the things that we're best at and pay the attention that it needs to make sure that when it gets out to the client or the customer, that everything is great.
Right. Cool. What do you guys think about immersive reverb workflows? What do you find works?
You've used reverb mastering, right?
Not a ton.
Right. I don't. I think there was a perception heading into mixing in immersive audio that, hey, the easiest thing you need to do is just put a big reverb on it and then it'll sound like it's in a room. As it turns out, that's a bad idea. It's a better idea to create a sense of space by moving things around, and then judiciously use some reverbs to fill in the gaps. You know, a stereo mix with a 712 reverb isn't an immersive mix. It's just a wetter version of a stereo mix.
Right.
So a lot of times I find myself trying to create individual spaces for the instruments, or again, because I don't have to rob Peter to pay Paul, I can let the drum rooms be drum rooms, and I can put them in a place where there's a perception that the drums are in a room, and then I don't need to add reverb to them to make them sound bigger. I can save it for a vocal, or I can save it for an individual instrument. When I work, generally I have at least 2 reverbs running to a bed, and they're both 712 reverbs, because we can't do 914 yet in Pro Tools. And
I'm gonna keep fighting you on that, Reid.
One's short and one's long, basically, you know, and that's generally the starting point. And then most of the rest of the time I'll treat stuff individually for each thing.
Fair enough. Cool. So what question here is, what kind of controller do you use? And you know, I'm assuming that's, you know, do you have like an S6 or an S1 or anything like that attached to your Pro Tools, or are you mouse mixing for these things?
I let Pro Tools touch me however it wants.
Yeah.
I don't. Right now, I've got a mouse behind me. I've got a dock with an iPad, which is really nice for moving stuff around. Frankly, one of the coolest things about Atmos, and the best way to work as far as panning, is to not look and just move, right? So when I can put a finger on a touchpad and move it until it feels good to me, like, that's a huge advantage. I have an S1 too.
Nice.
You know, frankly, for at least music workflow, I found that the smaller controllers, for me, are more utilitarian than a really big Surface, because a lot of the time I find myself using joysticks or the panning on the iPad and faders, and I don't end up using a ton of other stuff on like a bigger S6.
Nice.
I use a really nice vintage Kingston trackball. For that analog sound.
Right. Just wired, directional cable.
Wired's
Directional.
important.
Definitely, you got to plug in the directional cable the correct way.
And
is it one with the analog turn wheel around it? Not the digital. Okay.
Yeah, classic. No, I don't need. I mean, I don't have any need for a control surface typically, and I can do everything I need to just the long way. You know.
Nice.
I generally I'm not, you know, on the mastering side, I'm going to assume that those, you know, the spatial choices have been made, and unless it's causing a problem, and then I might go back to the mixer, and if the mixer's Reid, we'll just deal with it at the mix level. So I don't really want to ruin the integrity of the mix. So I don't, you know, a surface isn't really needed for what I'm doing.
Nice. Can you share some practices for enhancing the punch and energy in an Atmos mix when you don't have a mix bus to go through?
Well, I mean, you can make a punchy mix without a mix bus.
Yeah.
In fact, the stereo stuff that I do, by and large, isn't crushing itself through a stereo compressor. Like I have my stereo bus right now is mainly color, and I have one of the dangerous stereo limiters on it, and it's like the needle barely moves. It's just lighting up lights. So I'm dealing with stuff on an individual and sometimes a parallel level, and that translates really well to Atmos. Now, there are people, and I've done this too, and there are techniques where the sound you're getting is crushing a mix bus. It's more of a challenge to replicate that in the box. You know, you can do it analog and run a 714 compressor or a 914 or some sort of discrete compressor setup. And you can do it in the box with parallels and you know, printing a mix and using the mix as a key to different compressor or limiter
I've definitely
chains.
done that before.
Yeah. So it really, I mean, it just depends on the project. It depends on the song. And again, as we get more tools and we dig into this stuff more, there's more options available. So I don't know if that answered that question, but there's a couple of different ways to skin a cat on that.
Nice. Cool. So how much do you use objects versus the beds for instrumentation? And how do you deal with any tone change that occur when you set different binaural metadatas and things?
Well, I if it were up to me, I wouldn't use the bed. I think objects sound better. Like, we've done extensive testing and listening, and objects sound better than the bed.
More flexible.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't even have to move them, right? You can set them where the bed would set them.
Yeah, you create a object bed.
Yeah. So generally, as I've learned, and let's be honest, when I started and didn't know what the hell I was doing, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. You just watch how things evolve. Pete and I were talking about this the other day. At this point, the things that are in the bed for me are effects, and generally something where if there's like a tambourine or a loop that I want to like use a plugin that has its own panning thing, I'll just let that be in a bed. We look forward to hopefully some near future innovations from the DAW manufacturers that will make things like integrated object beds a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I place everything in objects. The binaural, another argument for mastering. I mean, the binaural, you kind of have to think of, one of the challenges of working in this format is you have to mix both ways simultaneously. You can't just mix it in speakers and check it in headphones and be done. That's a stereo thing, or vice versa. So yeah. I end up making larger decisions in the speakers of the way that it feels, and then going to headphones and making sure that the binaural translation works. And you start to learn how to make I don't want to say compromises, but finding a middle ground between where something sits in a room and where something sits in a headphone, using EQ, compression, placement, and the binaural settings.
Right.
You know, like, and I've experimented with every setting under the sun. The thing that I've come down to is there's a bunch of mids, and there's nears, and there's fars, and when I'm mixing, I know if I want something to sit in a little bit more of a space, I'm going to go ahead and assign that to a far or assign that to a near, knowing that as I check, it'll translate in that fashion. It's a learning process.
Nice.
Yeah, and I mean, on the mastering end, we'll, you know, if we're hearing problems and translating them into binaural, then we'll go through and experiment with those settings and try to find out what could be causing that issue, and see if it's easy as just, you know, switching that binaural setting on that one object. Even.
Generally, turning things off isn't a really good idea.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Fair. Okay. Cool. Well, we're nearly out of time. I'm going to answer some more of the questions as we go through the final bits of the deck here, just to close some stuff out. But I'll be right back with you. So for those of you asking, you know, for resources, the Dolby Atmos Music Series, Music Creation 101, hosted by Luca Geller, is available. Maggie Tobin talks about the binaural mixing and headphone modes in one of those episodes. Highly recommend this. And from what I understand, it's about to be localized as well. So very exciting to be able to get that out in a number of different languages as well. So Mix with the Masters series is ongoing. Steve Jenowick talks about the object bed in quite some depth and how he's used it and developed that over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. And Josh Goodwin also did a fantastic session as well. We have our learning resources on learning.dolby.com. That is a full curriculum for going through and educating yourself about what Dolby Atmos is and all of the buttons that you have to press and don't press. As you get into then delivering content, these resources are available on professionalsupport.dolby.com. So highly recommend digging into that and participating in the forums. For those of you interested in actually getting your room set up with Dolby Atmos, there are a bunch of resources again on our website, including our music studio onboarding form. And if you just want to get started working today, then go ahead and grab the download of the production suite and start learning what these things are and how they might affect your productions. Yeah, Reid, Pete, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you being so gracious with your time and all of your learnings. Look forward to chatting with you again later on today. So if you have more questions for Reid and Pete, they'll be on the second session as well. Thank you, and ideally wish we could have been together in Nashville, but that's for another time.
Yeah. See you soon. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Ceri.
Yeah, you've been great. Thank you for everything.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. All right. Have a great day all.
Bye.